had his eyes peeled trying to figure out where the road was, make sure that he didn't drive off into a ditch. Because he had one job, he was supposed to drive that stretch of road and check to see if there were any stranded motorists, give them aid, but all he was seeing was a bunch of fog creeping across the road. And then he saw this one section of fog that just kind of billowed and puffed out. And as he looked a little bit closer, he thought he saw a figure moving within that cloud of fog. It looked like a woman. Yes, he could see her moving through that fog with a very determined stride, like she was in a hurry to get somewhere. And then the fog parted a little bit, and he could see that her dress was glittering and shining in the night, and it looked like she'd been to a party. Yeah, she was wearing one of those fringed party dresses all the girls wear. And he kept looking at her, and she just kept marching through that cloud of fog. And she was keeping to the edge of the road, but it looked like she was really determined to get somewhere. So he drove up behind her, and he got closer. And he stopped. He honked his horn, and he leaned his head out. "Ma'am, do you need any help?" She didn't hear him. She just kept right on marching down the road. Oh, that was strange. And so he begins to follow her. And she continues to march down through that fog at the edge of the road, and she's looking very determined. In fact, she's almost got like a mad stance. Her shoulders are set and her arms are swinging hard to her sides. And so he comes up behind her again. He honks again. "Ma'am, do you need any help?" Well, she didn't stop again. She just kept right on walking. And by this time, he was getting a little fed up. This was enough. You do not ignore the law. And nobody ignores this officer. And so he continued to drive on down that road, seeing that woman as she was striding down that edge of the highway, going through that fog, in and out of that fog. And he finally came up beside her and got out, stopped, left his lights on, opened the door, got out, had his hand on his revolver, and he got over there to where she was at, and she stopped, and she turned around. And as she turned around, her face was as pale as snow. But her eyes were dark and burning. And he thought she was wearing rubies at her neck, but then he looked closer, and there was a slit in her throat. And rich red blood dripped down from that slit. And she glared at him again, and turned back around and continued walking on down the road. Well, that police officer just froze. No, that can't be right, he thought. And he hurried off through the fog, chasing her, running down the road. "Ma'am, ma'am, ma'am." She was gone. He couldn't find her anywhere. He went back to his car, and he got his flashlight out, and he began to look down into the gullies and the ditches and the sides of the road, trying to see, well, is there a car down here? Did she have a wreck? Is she injured? Did she walk off into the wet grass? But he couldn't see any paths. And anybody walking through that damp, dewy grass would have left a trail. But there was nobody anywhere around. Well, he went back to the police office, to the station. He was reluctant to tell his commanding officer anything about what he'd seen, but they were going to ask him for a report. He had to say something, so he finally just went in, told the commander, "You're not going to believe me, but..." And when he was finished, the commander looked at him and said, "That's out there around that corner by that creek, isn't it?" I said, "Yes." "Yep. We had a mobster a few years ago. Killed his girlfriend in that motel and restaurant that's up there on that cliff overlooking that area. Hid her body. Got rid of it. People have been seeing a really angry woman walking that road for a few years now. You're the newest one. So from that day forward, that police officer, whenever he was cruising that particular stretch of Route 66, and he saw that fog creeping in and coming across the road, he just kept driving and ignored anything else he ever saw. And that's the floozy in the fog.
That's good.
Now, people in small towns really do like to help one another. They like to get to know each other. They like the fact that they can look at, oh, Jim Bob there, I know his parents and his grandparents and his aunt and uncle, and I know them all the way back to the Garden Eden. Well, sometimes, though, you have strangers come in, and what are you going to do? Well, on this particular day, there was a woman that was working at her house. She was sweeping and cleaning and baking some bread, and her neighbor came rushing in. She said, "There's a man coming up the street. He's been stopping at some houses, and he's been asking people the strangest questions." And she said, "Oh, well, he's probably just a stranger coming through. We got to be friendly to folk, don't we?" And her neighbor said, "No, I don't think he is that kind of stranger. I think he's a stranger. And with that, the woman just kind of and went back to cleaning her house and taking care of that bread in the oven. And pretty soon, there was a knock on her door. And when she went to the door, she opened it to the oddest looking fellow she'd ever seen. He was an older gentleman. He had silver in his hair and a lot of wrinkles to his face. And his clothes, though, his clothes were odd, old-fashioned. And he was holding a hat in his hand, and he was whirling the rim of that hat, and he was looking around everywhere up and down the street, and he's going, "I need to find my son. My son has a house here. We've lived here for a long time. I need to find my son. Can you help me find my son?" He said, "Shh, calm. What's your name? What's your son's name?" And so after a few moments, she was able to calm the man down. He began to answer her questions. "My name is Jim Bryce. My son's name is Jim Bryce. I'd started a livery stable just right down the street there. And I built a beautiful big 2-story wooden house just right over there. And my son was helping me with the stables, and he was getting into these fancy automobiles that were getting all over the roads, and he was wanting to expand to fix those, and we had all kinds of plans. And I went out to take a walk one evening, and I took my dog with me. I remember that. I walked out and I walked down the road, and I remember looking back and looking at my house and those wonderful warm yellow lights in the windows, and just thinking it was the most wonderful sight in the world. And I just kept walking, and I don't remember anything more. Can you help me find my son? Can you help me find my house that was just right over there?" And so she sat him down. She gave him some tea with sugar, because she'd heard that would calm a person down. And then she began to think, Bryce. And she remembered when she was a little girl, and she'd remembered that there had been a house down the street, old run-down place, long empty and abandoned, that had burnt down. Yes, and She believed that family had run a garage. The name was Bryce. She looked at that gentleman again, and she looked at his funny, strange clothes, and she realized that those clothes were from a whole different century. She hadn't seen boots like that on a man in 60, 70 years. She hadn't seen pants like that with buttons and not zippers since she was a little girl. So she said, just a moment. And she went into the living room where they had a little bookshelf, and she looked around for a moment. She found it. There it was. Our Town's History. And she pulled that book out. And she flipped through its pages until she found, yes, there was the picture. Their very street, with the Bryce house right down the corner. And she turned around and she held it out to the gentleman. Is this your house? Oh, that's my house. That's my house. That's exactly it. But where is it now? She said, I don't know where it all happened, but it burnt down a long time ago. My son, he said, my son, my family, my wife. He said, just hold on a moment. And she went over to the phone book and she opened it. She began going through it for numbers until she found there was one Bryce left in town. She called that Bryce family. It took some doing, but they agreed to come over to the house and see this strange fellow. And as soon as they walked in the door, the man jumped up and said, my boy, my boy. And the man recognized the man's face. And he stopped dead. And he said, Great-grandpa? Great-grandpa? And he pulled out a book he'd brought along, photo album, and there was a picture of a dapper young man from just after the Civil War, looking dashing and handsome. He'd obviously just bought a brand new pair of clothes, had a new jacket on and high collar, and it was that face of that old, strange man, as if it'd come to life all over again. He said, we don't understand any of this, but we're going to go home. We're going to go home. But as they left, the woman said, wait, do you remember anything about when you disappeared? Anything at all? And the man stopped and he thought for a moment and he said, I remember hearing music. It was some strange music. And I was listening to it, and the next thing I know, I was waking up today and coming here. And as the woman waved the gentleman and his relatives away and out the door, she remembered something that her granny used to always say. Always be careful when you're out walking. And if you hear music in the woods, don't go and try and find it. Because there's little people, little folk, little things. And they'll grab you, and they'll take you, and they'll keep you for a long, long time. So be careful the next time you go out walking. And if you hear music, keep right on going.
I always knew that's where the moonshiners were. They play that so you don't come visit them.
Oh. Well, I write books and
collect stories and all that kinds of stuff.
Mm.
One time my son and I had decided we were going to do this project and we were going to write this book and we wanted to put some ghost hunters in it. But all we'd ever seen was the folks on TV. So we decided we needed some first-hand experience. So we connected up with this ghost telling group and we went in the dead of night. Everything has to happen at about midnight, you know. And so we arrive at this little house about 11:30, and we're going to have to be given a secret tour by the woman who owns the property because she doesn't want people going there and messing with it or anything like that. So we had to wait, and then when everybody was gathered, she said, we're going to go out and get in the cars and you're going to follow me and I will take you to my property, which was an old, empty, abandoned church building. And so we got in and we did a little snake down her street, down a country road, up a little bit of highway, off onto another country road, up this way, over that way, over this way, back this way. If you've ever played Snipe, we kind of felt like maybe that was what was happening. She didn't want anybody to be able to follow her trail.
Mm.
And then finally, we're driving down this bumpy, bumpy road. The grass on either side of it is shoulder high. It's waving in the moonlight that's coming out every once in a while as the clouds are passing back and forth. And we drive into the yard of this empty church. And we park and we get out and we're given our instructions and we go inside and we take our little chairs and we unfold them and set them down. And everybody sits bundled up because it's August, but it's cool that night. So everybody's bundled up and just waiting. And we see the moon coming through a broken window that way and it streams in every once in a while. And then the clouds will come by and obscure the light. And the wind will moan and the grass and leaves will rustle outside. And we're all just sitting there waiting because we've heard such stories. Oh, in this church, you'll see the ghostly church members who come in at midnight. And they come in and they sing and they take their seats, their places on the seats and the pews. And they'll get up and they'll walk out all in one group. And it's going to be wonderful. And I've got my camera ready. I've got my video camera ready. We will be able to capture anything that happens. And the lady who was next to me, she was one of the ghost hunters. And she had a piece of equipment, fancy electronics at work. And it was a meter that if everything was normal, it did green. A little light would just flash green, 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 green. And if anything unusual occurred, it would go to red. And I watched it for an hour. Green, 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 green. At one point we heard a rustling. Something hit the roof. Something rolled down it. 3 of the men jumped to their feet and rushed outside, ready to capture whatever it was that had happened, just in time to see a squirrel jumping off of the roof into the nearby tree.
Mm-hmm.
And they all came back and they said, well, it may have seemed like a squirrel, but it was probably something else. And so we sit back down and wait some more, and wait some more, and wait some more. There's a lot of waiting in ghost hunting. And so we're waiting and we're waiting and we're waiting until finally there's a cool breeze that blows in that open window. The cloud scuttles across the moon's face and the light grows dim. There's that cool, cool air blowing across the room, and suddenly I hear somebody gasp. We all sit back frozen, not sure what's going to happen. And about that time, the person down at the end of the row jumps up, frozen, like that. And he's shaking, visibly shaking. And his wife next to him, she's kind of looking at him like, what's happening? What are you doing? And she kind of slunches back to her chair like this. And then something cold moves past her. And by this time, I've looked around. Okay, this is the loony end of the group. And I'm looking around over here, and I'm noticing that the lady with the meter next to me, it's going green, green, red, green, green, red, green, red, green, red. And about that time, I feel a blast of frigid, Arctic cold air move against my leg. This entire side of my body is like I had been immersed in frozen water. And I'm looking out of the side of my face of over here at this lady, see her machine, and it's going red, 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 and I'm going, okay, keep calm, deep breaths. And about that time, I feel something lean against my leg. Almost like someone child-sized had put their elbow on my thigh. Red, 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 and that cold just moves across to the other side of my body. It goes over to the lady with her machine, and it's just blinking red, 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 red. And as it moved that way, the coldness left. And it worked its way down the rest of the group until finally they said, it's gone, said a voice at the far end of the line. And we all kind of took a breath. Nobody said anything. Nobody was willing to go out on a limb and say, I had something happen. So everybody just was frozen. And about that time, we heard something. No! We looked at each other, visibly frightened now. What was it? What was it? What was it? Nobody knew. Nobody knew. And then we heard a thud. Okay, somebody, what is that? What is that? And all the men jumped up at one time, ran into the kitchen. They were determined they were going to capture this, and they were going to make $1 million and get it on TV. And they go into the kitchen, and there, the window. And leaning inside was the nearby cow, who decided to be curious about what was going on in the old church. And so everybody goes back and sits down. It's like, okay, you haven't convinced me about anything. You know, everybody's very, very brave, very, this isn't anything, you know. And we all were sitting there just waiting again, waiting, some more waiting. And then finally, somebody says, do you see that over there? And over in the far corner was one lone, broken church pew. One end was broken down, so it was at an angle. And there was another seat in front of it that was straight. But the area was glowing. And everybody was seeing it glow. And as everyone's eyes were focused on that glow in the corner. And all these cameras and these videos were up and ready and waiting to take these pictures. Everybody was seeing what looked like a man in a white shirt that kind of glowed. And there was a shorter glowing object nearby that glowed. And everybody had the same thought. It's a father and his daughter. They've come to church one more time. And then soon the glow just kind of faded away. And we felt that cool, cold air once more blow through that room. Only this time it was going back out that window where it had entered. And once it was gone, the cloud pulled its screen away from the moon. The moonlight shone in. We could hear the night birds begin to sing. We could hear those cows in that field next door. Everything seemed to be returning to normal, except the heart rates of everyone in the group. Now, what happened? I'll leave that for you to determine. You can decide what it was that everybody saw, or didn't see, or didn't feel in that lost church over near Muskogee, Oklahoma. That's a lost church. I have to get my notes. I once had a mind like a steel trap. But then my trap got rusted, I think.
Great
Yes.
stories.
Well, I will tell you a couple of stories that come from my history book of UFOs seen and reported over Oklahoma. When I first came to Oklahoma, everybody said, we don't have any UFO stories here. Nope. And I got the opportunity to dig into the files of Air Force's Project Blue Book. And lo and behold, I found there were things that were reported right here in Oklahoma. And one of the neat things was that some of those stories were actually from right here, in Stroud. In 1953, there was a fighter pilot who was on his way from Tinker over to the Muskogee area, where there was a Army base and refueling center and repair center there. And he is zooming across the skies just right here, almost catty corner to where the Sauk and Fox Nation is, to the south of us. And he reported seeing these three brilliant green objects that were coming right across toward him and past him and went on. He said, I never saw them fall. They weren't like meteors. I never saw them fall. They just hurried past as fast as they could go. And there were three of them, one large, two smaller ones. And he reported it, and the Air Force called them meteors. But their actions did not match most descriptions of meteors. So people were interested. Then in 1957, or 59 rather, October, strangely about this time of the year, right here in Stroud, the daughter of the then city manager, son of the then city manager, was outside. It had been a wonderful lightning bug summer, and so he was determined to see if there were still any lingering lightning bugs outside. And so he'd gone outside in the cool of the evening after supper. And as he walks out, and he's walking out into the street, he's noticing that there's some other people that are out in the street too. He's, oh, okay, they must be looking for lightning bugs too. And so as he walks out into the street, then he notices that they're looking up. And he looks up as well. And there, coming from the northeast, was this brilliant, brilliant light. And one right after another came 4 others, each one of them a brilliant pastel color. And these round, glowing lights came right up overhead, and they halted. And as they halted overhead, they began to go round and round. And he was reminded of a carousel, a ride at the fair. These lights spinning around and around and around. And then suddenly from the northeast again came buzzing in this white, bright light. Went in right into the center of that group of rotating lights. And they all seemed to be rotating around that white, glowing light. And by now, people were out in the middle of the street, looking up, staring at these lights, wondering, what in the world is this? What are they? And as they watched, suddenly they stopped. And that white light zoomed out from the center, headed straight to the southeast, and the other lights fell into formation, one right after the other, and disappeared into the southeast. Now the next day, his father called the Air Force, called everybody he could think of, the FBI, the military, the state police, anybody. And no one ever returned his calls. And so to the day that that case was reported in the 1970s, no one had ever found an answer to what those glowing pastel lights really were. Mm-hmm. Now, another happens just about 10 years later. Right out here at the line of Creek County and Lincoln County. 2 girls had gotten off the school bus. It's a beautiful April day. They were really enjoying the fact that the days were a little bit longer and it was beginning to warm up, and so they had all kinds of plans about what they were going to do before they tried to do any homework. And so they went to their house, and as they were going toward the house, they saw this light over their shoulder. And it was like, when they first glanced at it, one of the girls said, "Oh, well, our neighbor's gotten a new light for his barn." And then, as they walked a little bit more and they looked at it some more, it's like, no, that's not a light. That's not near their barn. What is that? And as they looked, this light seemed to follow them as they were going. And what it looked like was a round, egg-shaped object with something that looked like fire burning on the inside that you could see. And the girls watched this, and it seemed to be following and getting closer to them. And so they hurried down, and the one girl's family was not at home. So they said, "Well, we'll go to your house." And so they rushed to that house. And when they got there, they were trying to knock. They were knocking and answered the door, "Please, open, open." And nobody was answering. And so the girls are digging through their pockets trying to figure out if there's a key that they'd lost and forgotten about. And they're banging on the door. And this thing seems to be getting closer and closer and closer. And finally, it was only like about a block away in distance. And they were seeing that, and those flames inside that center core did seem to be moving around back and forth, just like flames. And about the time that they get ready to knock again, their mother opened the door, towel around her head. She said, "I was in the middle of the shower. What's going on with you?" And they ran right straight past her, slammed the door behind them, and went to the far side of the house and said, "Lock the doors and don't open them." And they waited, and they tried through gasping breaths to explain what it was that they'd seen and why they were running and why that they were so excited. And their mother was just shaking her head. But finally they got calmed down enough that one of the girls decided, okay, we need to walk out there and see if that thing is still out there. This is not safe. We need to see if it's there, and then maybe do something. And so the girls clutching each other closely, crept back out the front door, down the steps, out into the street where they could look to see where they had seen that object before, and it was gone. It was nowhere to be seen. And they looked, and they looked, and they looked, but they never found it. They never found it again. They never heard of anyone seeing it. But when research was done into their case, it was discovered that an object very much like it had been seen that very day, earlier in the day, in South Carolina. So, what it was, that's the mystery. And that's what we love about stories like that. Is, what was it? Who knows? Now, there was another story.
Marilyn, your coat has grabbed Inky's attention.
Yeah, that figures. My coat is just fascinating, isn't it?
Yes. Maybe he thinks there's a ghost
Yes.
connected to your coat.
Inky is our cat here, by the way, at the museum.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
I just wanted you to be aware.
But people have also reported other strange things in the area of Stroud. One of them was in 1957, and it was a little girl who had gone out with her grandfather just north of the lake area. That's where their farmland was, and she had ridden out with her grandfather because she just loved going out with Papa, she called him. And they were going into the forest, and he was going to be checking some land that he had, and there were some nut trees there, and he was going to gather some of those for some pie for Grandma to make. And as they were wandering through there, Grandpa is just walking along, telling her this, telling her that, and pretty soon he keeps listening. Just keep talking, child, he tell her. And she's just chattering away, and then finally they get to this one place, and Grandpa stops, and he looks around. And he looks, and he's listening. He says, shh. And she could hear something then. It sounded like a big branch broke. And so Grandpa said, here, come with me. And he took her over and set her down by this tree trunk. It was half rotted away. He said, you sit here, you don't move till I come and get you. And so Grandpa goes off into the woods. And while she's sitting there, she hears that sound again, that snap, like something had broken a branch. So she's looking around, is that Grandpa coming back? And as she looks straight ahead, right through the tall weeds and the bushes and the saplings, she sees over by this tree, not more than 40 feet away, this tall, furry creature who's standing up on two legs, had brown fur all over it. But its face looked strangely like a man. And it turned and it looked at her, kind of cocked its head like, well, what are you? And then she could hear Grandpa tromping back through the woods, coming. The creature looked up, looked beyond her as if to look to see where Grandpa was, looked at the little girl again, turned around, slipped back through the saplings and the underbrush, totally disappeared. And by the time the Grandpa came back, all she had was a story to tell him about what she had seen there in the woods. Grandpa made her promise to not tell anyone what she'd seen, to not tell Grandma, to not tell Mom, to not tell Dad. And he never took her back into that part of the woods ever again. And she was really sad about that because she said, I kind of like the furry guy. So, to this day, there are people who swear, stack of Bibles, that in that same area, they've had some odd meetings as well with someone who lives in the woods and likes it among the trees. So be careful where you walk. Well, let's see how's our time going? Ooh, we're good.
Coming up on 3.
Okay, I got time for one more. You ready for a? Yep.
Iggy, what are you doing?
One of the reasons why I like stories is because stories can teach us things. And that's what this story does. In almost every town, there's always a place or a woman off in the boonies, out in the woods, down by the creek, out in the boondocks. She's known for things she does. Some people call her a wise woman, some call her a conjuring woman, some people just call her a witch, some just call her just that old crazy lady who lives out in the boonies. But they go to her and they buy her jam and they buy her nuts that she's canned up and they buy the bread that she bakes, and occasionally, sometimes, somebody will come and they'll get a treatment for some rheumatism. Somebody's got an awful itch or hives or something that the doctor can't control, so they go to the woman and she takes care of him, gives him some potion or salve, takes care of him. But there's also, usually in every town, somebody who's a little bit no good. Those mean people. Those people who love to cause others pain. They get pleasure from it. Because all that they want to do is just make sure that they get everything that they want. And in this particular community, they had such a man. He ran the local mill. He ran it with an iron fist. He fired at will. He abused his employees. He cheated them at every chance that he got. And then finally he got cheated in return. Somebody was either meaner than he was, smarter than he was, or he was just getting slow in his older age. He got caught. He got fired. That man stomped off with anger in his soul and a taste for vengeance. He was going to make them pay. Every one of them was going to pay for what they'd done to him, forgetting all the things that he'd ever done. So he heard these whispers that came to him about this woman who did these salves and these lotions and these potions. And he just knew that if he went to go visit her, he could make her give him a potion that he could give to those people who'd fired him and make them pay hard. And so he tromped out through the woods, went down through the gully, came through the dry ravine where her cabin sat. He stomped up to the door, didn't even wait to knock, and he kicked it open, went inside, and there she was, fixing gauze over the top of some of her jellies. And she stopped at this monster of a man who'd come into her house uninvited, and she glared at him, and she said, "What do you want?" And he looked at her and glared back, and he said, "I want you to fix me a potion. I mean to make sure that they pay, and they pay hard for what they did to me. And with that, he took one of those great big fists of his, and he reached out and he slung it toward her, knocked her across her bed. Her jam spilled on the floor and gushed all over the wood. And she struggled up, holding her jaw. "You didn't have to hit me." And she glared at him and she said, "All right, but I warn you, what you want always comes with a price. I don't care, I'll pay anything. I want you to give me that potion so I can make those people pay." And with that, she set to work. She rushed everything off of her table. She gathered a pot, pulled this, pulled that, gathered a bit of this, gathered a bit of that, put them in that pot and began to stir them around. And as she stirred, she kept looking at that man. She said, "Vengeance is a sour and bitter fruit." "Shut up, old woman. You just do your work." She'd look at him again. She'd go, "Vengeance, vengeance, vengeance. Oh, it leaves a bad taste in the soul." The man reached out and he hit her again. She stumbled away, and one last turn of her hand in that mixture, she stopped, lifted her hands out, and then said, "It's finished." She reached in there, she put some of that lotion, some of that into the bottom of a jar, looked at it, went over to one of her potion bottles, lifted it up to the light, splashed it around. Yes. Reached over, poured that into it until it topped that bottle. Put a cork in the top, shook it a little bit. Yes, vengeance. Oh, vengeance leaves a smell and a stain. "Shut up, woman." And with that, she reached out and she gave him the potion. "Now get out. Take it. Drink it right out there and then go away. I never want to see you again." And with that, the man said, "That's all right with me." And he reached out and gave her one more fist across the face, and she flung back into the bed again. And he stomped out of the cabin, out into the sunlight, dappling in that dry ravine. And he reached up, yes, took that cork out and gulped it all down. And he stepped forward. He started to go down that ravine, crunching the dry leaves and the branches and everything as he walked. And then suddenly something reached out from the side of the ravine. It reached out and wrapped its arm around his leg. And he looked down, and it was a black, ugly, oily looking root. He tried to get his foot free from it. And about that time, there was another one that came up from the other side of the ravine. It wrapped itself around his arm and held it in place. And then there was another one that came and got the other arm and held it like this. And then suddenly, they were crawling up everywhere. His legs, his body, his arms, his chest, all the way up until it covered his entire being. And then suddenly he felt below, underneath him, the ground begin to fall away. The sand opened, and a hole grew, and he slowly sank into that hole, into that dark, wrapped in those oily, dark, ugly roots, until finally his head went below the surface. And then the wind stirred up and the sand blew back over that hole. And the leaves covered over that area. And the wind carried its message out through the night. Somewhere you could hear the sound of a voice saying, vengeance is bitter. Vengeance always has a cost. And that's the story. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
Well, I hope that you enjoyed that.
Yes.
And if you have any questions, I'm more than capable of making up an answer.
So are you appearing anywhere else?
I'm going to be doing stories at the local senior citizen center, Prairie Point, at the end of the month.
Cool.
I'm going to be at Muskogee Public Library next Saturday doing a UFO presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm supposed to be doing a presentation at an event that is supposed to happen the 25th in Dorman, but that's also a game day, so I haven't heard the confirmations yet, so the guy may have decided, whoop, we can't do this on game day.
are you all on Facebook? Because you
Yes.
can follow Marilyn's.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
we've been
Yeah.
followers
Yeah.
for
Oh, well,
many years.
yes, you folks are new, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do you
Marilyn,
live here in Stroud?
We live between Stroud and Prague.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, I'm glad you were able to come today. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Good.
fantastic, Marilyn, fantastic.
Speaking of UFOs, what do you think of that Atlas or whatever we got flying around up there? Everybody's talking about.
It's very fascinating. I think it has a lot of hyperbole with it right now. People are,
Mhm.
just making wild stories. But I think that whatever it is, it does have some very interesting anomalies
Right.
that we're not either familiar with, or it's something we've just never encountered before.
Mhm.
But alien invasion, I don't think so. No.
I didn't either, but it's just odd. A lot of people are saying a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I'm just it's like, well, maybe it's because of what it's made out of, because it's making different colors and doing weird things. And,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot of different things going on that's not normal to.
Yeah. Normally, if it's the kind of comet that we're
Right.
familiar with, it's comets as they approach the sun. Normally, all their expulsions of
Mhm.
particles will be to the rear, and this one has actually demonstrated it's shooting something out of the front occasionally. And so, whether that means that there's some, portion of it that is has a different chemical makeup
Yeah, who knows what
or
it's made out of.
something, reacting different as it comes into contact with whatever. But it is interesting that somebody had theorized the fact that they had mentioned that here, I think it was last year, that they had recorded where a star or a system had been destroyed,
Uh-huh.
and one theory is that this particle may be part of that destruction, because it would be, by the time that light came to us to see that it had been destroyed, you're talking thousands and thousands of years in the past there. So that's an interesting theory that something blew up and it's now hurtling toward us. So
Another theory they thought too was back in the 70s, they had a 40-second broadcast, a narrow beam broadcast that they couldn't explain.
yeah, the wow
And-
signal.
Yeah, and it's sort of on the same wavelength that this thing is shooting. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of weird skepticism going
And
on.
they have had some reports of some anomalous radio signals that they've received from some of the same general area in more recent times.
Right, it's real convenient that the government shut down.
Yeah.
They got the best video in the world. You can even see it.
That way they can say it's not our fault.
Yeah, we saw nothing.
Yeah.
Well,
I just hope we don't piss it off, whatever it is.
time will tell.
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe
time
we
will
already
tell.
have.
Well, thank you
Well,
so
thank
very
you
much.
very
much.
Thank you.
This is really good.
And I hope you'll, if you've enjoyed the Singing Museum is growing and